All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from all ages, thank you so much for tuning into this very special interview of Good Brother Dialogue with a man that I have been a fan of for so long, almost a decade at this point. 3 more years, it's going to be a decade. I've been watching his interviews, watching his craft for so long. My first ever video of this individual happens to be with Dolph Ziggler I believe he had the mustache still. He had the mustache for No Shave November. And he said the mustache is still on, ladies and gentlemen. And then he interviewed some people. I don't know if you guys heard of these people, but Bully Ray happens to be one of them. Let's see, The Miz, of course. He recently interviewed a couple of big stars as well. Matt Cardona. Ooh, let me see here. Oh my goodness. Deonna Purrazzo was another one as well. There's so many names that this man has interviewed that he was gracious enough and kind enough to go on here. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm introducing the best in the world, Chris Van Vliet. How are you, my friend?
Wow, what an introduction. The best in the world. I don't know about that. Thank you for having me on, Mike.
Of course. I don't want to steal the thunder of Greg Hamilton, which, of course, is a huge inspiration as well. But, you're pretty...
Yeah, Greg's great.
So first, I always start off these interviews with a spitball or fireball question, of course, because I always like to get the mood set for these interviews. What was it like interviewing MJF at his hotel room?
Oh, the absolute worst experience that anyone could ever have. I would not wish that upon anyone. People always ask me, what's MJF like off camera? MJF off camera and MJF on camera are the same person. He's just not a nice person. And I hope that I never have to speak to him ever again.
He is truly the salt of the earth, as an email said once to me once before. But speaking about, of course, everybody knows about Chris Van Vliet and the brand that you have created, the YouTube channel, the separate YouTube channel, which is CVV Clips, which you guys should subscribe to as well, is focusing on the highlights of your interviews. So the question I want to start off with first is, what inspired the passion to become a broadcaster?
It was something I loved when I was a kid. I remember being 4 years old. We had a Fisher-Price tape recorder with a little microphone on it. And I remember emulating the radio broadcast that I heard as a kid. I'm sure my mom still has these tapes somewhere, cassette tapes. Yeah, like we're going way back here. This is the 80s. Wow. Mm-hmm. So that was it. And I grew up and I was so drawn in by the radio broadcasters and the television broadcasters that I looked up to. Big Blue Jays fan growing up in Toronto, and I would listen to the radio broadcasts and pretend I was them when I was playing baseball. So that was it. And fast forward a bunch of years till I was in high school, I was in a class called Communication Studies, which I loved. And we were making news broadcasts every single week. We were creating television segments every single week. And I'm like, this is great. This doesn't feel like a class. Every other class, you sit there and you take notes and you do tests. Here we were making television. And I'm like, I want to do that for a living. So long story short, I just wanted to have a job that didn't feel like a job. I wanted to have a job that I was proud to go to at the start of the day and proud of what I had accomplished at the end of it.
Well, that's awesome. That very sounds familiar with my beginnings as well, because during high school, I would be a part of the newspaper squad, as we would like to call it back in the day. And during that class, we had the availability of, we were on online newspaper. And so what was great about it was that I was the sports editor. So, the passion of sports always came along. It was nothing that was like, okay, so I saw one Jim Ross match and I thought, hey, I could do this for the rest of my life. It was something that I've thought from the very beginning. This is the coolest job in the world. I was an 11-year-old kid thinking, I have to do this.
Yeah. I did the morning announcements at my high school. I hosted the talent show. I hosted the fashion show. I was the vice president of my student council. And I just loved that. I just loved being in front of people. I loved performing. And that's very much what broadcasting is. You're being yourself, but you're being an amped up version of yourself telling a story. And at the end of the day, that's what I really love. I love telling stories.
To quote Ethan Page over in All Ego Ethan Page, it's yourself, but just tuned up 100%. So that's what I absolutely love about this industry. Speaking about this industry, of course, you've had your hosting background and doing all, like you mentioned before, about doing these hosting gigs. Can you talk about what was your mind process like the first time you've ever received a hosting gig? Was there nerves? Was there like, you know what, I've already done this. This is a piece of cake.
Yeah, well, I hadn't already done it, so it was quite a process. It was an internship at a TV station about an hour away from my hometown. And to kind of back it up a little bit, I didn't have an internship lined up after my senior year of college, and all my friends had internships or jobs lined up, and I had nothing. So I was reaching out to every TV station, every radio station, anywhere around my hometown, anywhere around my college town, anywhere around Toronto in general, which is where I grew up, just to say, hey, I'm about to graduate. I want to come in and see how it's done in the real world. And a TV station in Toronto brought me in and they said, hey, you're probably going to be making photocopies and phone calls. What do you actually want to do? I said, I want to be on air. I want to be on TV. And I said, well, I've got this other opportunity to go to this small station, like an hour away from my hometown. They said, if you can get an internship there, that'll be really good for you. So I reached out to the general manager of this TV station. They had no interest in seeing me at all. I found the general manager's email somewhere online, sent him an email and said, hey, I'm actually going to be in that town next week on my spring break. It'd be great if I could meet up with you and talk about the possibility of an internship. This was a complete lie. I made this up totally. And he fell for it. He said, if you're going to be here next Thursday, come on in at 9:00. And he looked at my resume. He said, we don't normally offer internships for people who aren't getting college credit for it, but this is an impressive resume. You did the radio show at your college and you wrote for the college newspaper. That's good stuff. And that's how it started. And that internship, I drove 60 miles each way, turned into a job. And that was really how it began. And I was like 2 weeks into my internship. And my internship, by the way, was me following around one of the reporters. And when you're at a small station, the reporter does everything. They shoot, they write, they edit, they produce, they do everything. And 2 weeks into my internship, the assignment editor goes, here's your story for the day. I said, oh, great, cool. Which reporter am I going out with? Well, you're going out with Terry, but this is your story. You're going to be on the 6:00 news tonight.
Wow.
So I'm an intern, 2 weeks into my internship, and I'm already on TV. So that kind of ended up leading into me working there. And look, I was terrified. First of all, I had no idea I was going to be on TV when I got to work that day. And then every other day after that, as an intern, I was on TV, which was the most incredible experience. And I think the lesson to be learned here is if you're willing to put in the work, that work will end up being rewarded.
Hey, might they say, it's always about the process more rather than the journey at the end sometimes. But that's what I love about your story, is that your story going from, getting the internship and then 2 weeks. Oh, great, I'm doing television. But also I like to mention too, you also traveled from Toronto all the way to Cleveland. So can you talk about what that transition was like? Because of course, for those who don't know, he was Mr. Entertainment over in that news site as well. So can you talk about that transition for us?
So that was such a cool job. I was the entertainment reporter for the CBS affiliate in Cleveland. I got to report from the Oscars, report from the Grammys. I won a few Emmys while I was there. That job actually kind of came up kind of by accident, I guess. So that internship that turned into a job, I got a job from there 18 months later. I was hosting a show on MTV2 Canada in Vancouver, which was amazing. I was hosting this national show 2 years into my broadcasting career. Incredible. After a year, that show ended up getting canceled because one media conglomerate bought out this other one, merged together, and had to, save some money. So I was actually out of work for 7 months. And I was applying to all these jobs in every city I could possibly think of in Canada. And I would be like, down to me and one other person, me and two other people, and someone else would get the job. And it was so frustrating because I just come from like living this amazing job, being on this amazing show in Vancouver. Now I have nothing. I literally had to pack up my car, drive 47 hours from Vancouver back to Toronto, move back in with my parents with no job after being on TV for 2 years. And after I was applying for all these other jobs and not getting them, I said, if I can't get a job in my own country, I think I'm gonna have to look elsewhere. And that's when I started looking to see if I could get an agent in the US. And that's when the wheels really started to get into, motion here. I did get a job in Toronto in the meantime, but after hosting this entertainment show in Toronto, my agent said, How would you feel about being an entertainment reporter in Cleveland? Ironically, I'd just been to Cleveland that previous summer. My dad and I traveled to a different baseball stadium every single year. I'm like, wow, what are the odds? I was just in Cleveland. Now I'm, have this opportunity to audition there. And that was amazing. I was in Cleveland for 5 years. Like I said, Oscars and Grammys, to be able to report from them and to be able to interview some of the biggest stars in the world. It was such a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, during those 5 years, of course, you've come and gone with all the sports over there in Cleveland. Of course, you went through the struggles of the Cleveland Cavaliers, which of course they didn't win a championship. So I believe either you had just left or
I just left. Yeah,
you just left. So was there any like, man, if I would have stayed there one more year, I could have interviewed LeBron?
It's funny. I took my talents to South Beach and went from Cleveland to Miami. And like a few months later, LeBron went back to Cleveland. I'm like, was this some sort of a trade here? Like, is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's awesome. Of course, we would hopefully one day we might see LeBron and Chris Van Vliet in the same room. Hopefully, maybe.
Yeah, I would. I'd love to interview that guy
in Los Angeles. But can you talk about the atmosphere Cleveland had brought to you? Because of course, you have interviewed and done your hosting show over in the station over there in Cleveland. So what was the experience like? Was it something that, of course, it was way different than Toronto, or was it like, you know what, I'm ready for any new challenge that steps up?
Yeah, and I definitely am ready for any new challenge that's thrown at me. And the show I was hosting in Toronto was a half-hour show that came on once a week. Then I went to Cleveland where I was going to do a 90-second entertainment hit in like 4 newscasts. So it was a big difference. But I was really excited I could bring some fast-paced energy to a newscast. I knew I was going to be the quote-unquote fun part of the newscast because I was going to be reporting on entertainment news and celebrities, and that stuff's always fun. Cleveland has such a special place in my heart. It's such a great city. The cool thing was it was 5 hours from my hometown, so I could drive home when I wanted. Friends always came down and came to Browns games with me, or Cavs games, or Indians games, or Lake Erie Monster games. That's the hockey team there. Cleveland's just a really special city. And for that to be my first induction into living in America was great. And that job was incredible. And, I got to interview a few wrestlers who call Cleveland home. I mean, it's not their home, but it's their home city. The Miz, Dolph Ziggler, became very good friends with Johnny Gargano when I was there. So nothing but love for Cleveland.
Yeah, well, Cleveland, I would always consider a hometown for CVV. And that's what's awesome is that watching the interviews, like I mentioned before, from the beginning of your tenure of Cleveland, just to see you progress and then go take your talents to South Beach, going from there is absolutely just mind-blowing as a longtime fan.
Yeah, Cleveland was great. And I was actually back there recently. I had a very minuscule, tiny part in the new Russo brothers film called Cherry. Mm-hmm. So when that movie finally does come out, when movies are, able to come out again, there's a scene with Tom Holland in a very dramatic scene. And I'm the guy standing next to Tom Holland, but it was great to be back in Cleveland for that.
Was it the one that you posted on Instagram where you had accidentally said, "This is Chris Van Vliet"? No, it's not.
That was great, right? That was a corporate video I shot recently. And the editor, everything together. And then he sent me this clip. He's like, you might like this.
I've always made those mistakes before, especially during a production that had recently got canceled due to this global pandemic. What had happened was that my role was on screen. It was a non-speaking role. And what had happened was that I had accidentally went like this, and I was looking at the character who was speaking. And then for some reason, my eye just thought, there's a camera right there. So I'm just gonna look at the
That's
camera.
What hosts do, right? We're drawn to cameras.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah, just this interesting camera right here. Hi, people. So anyways, so like we mentioned before about your acting background and of course about your broadcasting background as well. You've done a lot. You've done a lot of amazing things. And of course, you've interviewed a lot of amazing people. Can you talk to us about, you've not just done broadcasting, you've also done the acting perspective. You've also done a lot in the filmmaking industry. Can you talk about being, what's the proper word? Being the veteran per se of doing all these different avenues in the filmmaking industry?
Well, I'm definitely very much a novice when it comes to movies and filmmaking. I mean, I've spent like, I don't know, it was a handful of days on movie sets. I did a lot of background work, especially when I had to drive back home and live with my parents. I did a bunch of background work when I was back with my parents in Toronto. I'm in a movie called The Love Guru. I'm in a movie called Chloe during that time. Played a reporter in a few movies, but this is something I really want to dive more into. And an interview I recently did with Stu Bennett. I mean, he made that transition from pro wrestling to acting. I mean, now he's like a star of like 5 movies or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very fascinated by that. You know, I've been in broadcasting now for 15 years, which is crazy for me to say. And
Right.
I want to, oh, please. And I want to continue. I love broadcasting. It's my first love, my number one passion. I love it. I love that it's kind of evolved now, though. It's not broadcasting so much as it's narrow casting, you know?
Right.
When I got into TV in 2005, it was like whatever was on the television at that time, you had to watch because that's the way it worked. Mm-hmm. There was no such thing as YouTube, and Facebook was in its infancy. Now it's like, if you want to watch something very, very specific, you just go on YouTube, type it in, boom, it's there. So I love the path that we're on right now. It's a great time for you. What an exciting time for you. You're getting into the world of radio and television and content creation because you can carve out your very, very specific niche, which no generation could do before this.
All right. I mean, I've always, of course, like I mentioned before, this pandemic was a blessing in disguise, I would say, a little bit, because it gives us the opportunity now to reach out to people, to actually get a conversation with those who you always wanted to interview. Like, trust me, I would love to interview Chris Van Vliet like 10 years, or, well, of course I can't say that, but 5+ years ago. But of course, due to scheduling and all that, that wasn't possible. But of course, thanks to the age of digital interviews and digital conversations like Skype, like the format that I'm not saying that we're doing on right now, that you've been using on most of your interviews. It's amazing. It's definitely something that we're very thankful for during these times of uncertainty.
It's funny that, like, when you reach out to someone, especially like in March and April, when you reach out to someone and ask them to do an interview, nobody's busy now, right? If someone's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm too busy," I'm like, "Busy doing what?" I know stuff's starting to pick up now, but you're right. The pandemic has been a blessing in disguise in a few ways. Number one, it's all caused us to pivot and go, all right, this thing's going right, so we got to go right with it and figure out how to do this thing. And number two, I heard someone refer to it as the great pause. And that's exactly what this has been. It's been a chance to pause and think about who's important, what's important, and what path you're on and where you want to be headed when things do, I'm going to use air quotes, go back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, once everything, like you mentioned before, goes back to normal, I feel like that everybody's gonna have a new appreciation towards life now, because I think
I hope so.
And I've been not a victim, but like I've been a huge I'll say it, a victim of it. I was just so busy. I was so busy at the beginning of this year, especially with school being my last semester of community college, and then just it was that job, doing an internship on top of that, and the internship was not going that well because they were like, "Man, you're going through class and you're missing an hour of that," because that's what had to happen. Because so basically, a little bit of the story. I'm not going to mention my internship because that's not here nor there. But what had happened was that I would have to drive 30 minutes from my school to the internship, and they would get upset because we were going straight from class to there. They weren't liking that. But then they flipped the script. They're like, "Well, why are you missing class?" Because they were upset at first, but now they're upset that we're missing class. So very confused. But I mean, I'm thankful for the experience, because obviously, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't get as much knowledge as I do now.
Sure.
So it is what it is.
It all works out in the end.
It all works out in the end. It also works out for this charger, which I'm about to plug in this beautiful thing, because I was just notified by my laptop that we have 6%. So I'm
gotta have more than 6%.
Because I've dealt with an interview last time that had happened. Okay, I think the ring light might have to go off this time. There we go. So you might see a blank screen for now, Chris, which I do apologize.
No, I see. I I see you. It just looks
Yeah,
like we're in a horror movie now.
I know. So sadly, well, see now this thing. You know what? I'm gonna do this impromptu.
What a shirt, by the way.
What a
What a shirt.
yes, thank you.
Look at that.
Oh man, the sock monkey Mike shirt, as they say. It's very.
What a shirt.
Yes.
Wow.
So I do apologize to the fans out there that like the ring light better, but sadly I got to charge this in order to keep battery and
You only have one plug.
So anyways, so transitioning now. So I wanted to talk about something that I've been very interested in lately. We'll go into, how to do that into interviewing wrestlers and that and all these very, very famous people later. But I do want to mention this one appearance that you made on this one wrestling show. Oh my goodness, what's it called? It's called something with an A, something with an E, and something with a W. So what was it like? Yeah, it's called All Elite Wrestling. And you had the chance to be the backstage. Oh my God, it was called. Don't tell me. It was okay. Fine, you have to tell me. It was the backstage correspondent, basically, and it was from the control room. There you go. That's what I was trying to remember for AEW. Can you talk about what that experience was like? Because as a fan, I've got to be honest. I saw Chris Van Vliet. I'm like, oh my God,
dude, it was so cool. The control room segment was awesome, but then to be invited to be part of the very first broadcast of Dynamite on TNT, the first time that wrestling had been on TNT in almost 20 years, first time that WWE had any sort of competition in almost 20 years, it was really cool. To be able to be this tiny part of the show was so cool, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Everyone in AEW has been so awesome, and they're just such talented people. And look, I think it's exciting just as a wrestling fan, and that's what I am. I'm a wrestling fan just like you are. And to be able to see what AEW's done and completely changed the game over the last year, it's exciting to watch.
Well, it's definitely exciting to watch, especially now in the way that they've kind of storytelled now, especially with the fact that, of course, there is no live crowd, and that transition, which, of course, you're looking at sports fans now who have to watch baseball without fans, who have to, there's different aspects of sports that people are coming back to, like basketball and baseball are coming back the same exact month. So, it's that transition is very, to me, I'm used to the fans being there. That's the reason why I'm even doing this, is because, as one great Vince Scully said, if it wasn't for the roar of the crowd, he wouldn't be doing this job. So, it is great, a weird transition, but of course, like what you're doing and seeing appearances, of AEW is crazy. It's crazy and it's awesome at the same time.
I wonder what Vin Scully would say now, because, there's no roar of the crowd anymore. It's going to be very weird. And, we've seen wrestling's ratings take a hit because there's no crowd. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to see if baseball and basketball and hockey's, and I think NFL is actually going to have fans, but I wonder if those other ones I wonder if their ratings are going to take a hit as well.
Well, to me, I've always believed that as long as you can try to pull it off, I think I would be a fan regardless. I mean, you look at stuff like the Boneyard match, for example. Absolutely well done cinematic match that did not need a crowd whatsoever. There was I would even go as far as saying there was a Raw before Money in the Bank, I want to say. And they were doing the contract signing between Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins. I think that whole segment by itself didn't need an audience.
I think wrestling, though, needs an audience. And I think Hurricane Helms explained this to me the best way. He said, this is like going to see a comedy show with no crowd. And I think that this is the thing about wrestling, is the crowd tells you what to think. The crowd got Daniel Bryan over as much as he was, so they ended up winning the championship. I mean, it's just one example, but I think it's interesting that, like, especially in March, April, we were literally a captive audience. Everybody in America was in quote unquote lockdown in their homes on a Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, whatever you want to call it, when Raw was on. Mm-hmm. The ratings should have been through the roof. They should have. And I'm shocked that the ratings went down when literally, there's no excuse not to watch wrestling other than I don't want to watch wrestling.
Right. I think, you know what? I think it's more towards the perspective of they want the old normal. They want the old crowds in the audience, and you see
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like Drew McIntyre winning the world title at WrestleMania 36,
Yeah.
which in my eyes was not a bad WrestleMania at all. I think what they did was very well structured. I think there were some weird moments in WrestleMania during that time, like Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley. But you know what? Other than that, I thought it was well done, especially without an audience.
Well, considering, the circumstances that they had, but I just think it's strange that on any any normal week, you can say, oh, sorry, I missed Raw because I was working late. I was at a party. I went to happy hour. I went to the baseball game, whatever. Well, in the middle of April, when none of those things were an option, and literally, again, everybody's sitting at home, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that people decided not to watch. So anyway, I'm just interested to see what happens with our sports ratings.
Hey, it will take a hit. I will admit. I mean, I did watch the first UFC fight night of the pandemic, as they say.
Yeah, it's cool.
So what was funny was how much bad reception it had, because each and every fight, fans were saying like, of course, through Twitter or Instagram, and they were saying, you know what, this looks like an episode of The Ultimate Fighter, which
it did.
They were saying that because there's no audience, it doesn't seem like a fight. That's how much a crowd means to a lot of people, because for decades and for generations, we had complained about, oh well, this crowd wasn't great, they didn't get this pop, they didn't get this. Now there's not a crowd, so what do you have more to complain about? That there's not a crowd. So I mean, it is what it is. But honestly, once we do get back into the old normal, new normal, whatever you like to call it, it would be definitely, I think it would appreciate fans more, not just of sports, but just in everything in general. Because I remember that there was a lot of things canceled. I had a production that was going on at my community college before all this had occurred, that had it canceled, because obviously we weren't given the green light to go and social distance and wear masks and all that jazz over there. So, I know I'm going on a little bit, rambling a little bit, but of course I do want to get into more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah,
and especially with this ring light, of course, going out on me last minute, of course, transitioning to this beautiful on thing lighting over there. So one of the questions I was really interested in knowing was the fact that, of course, you were making that transition to Cleveland, and then, of course, going out through the hard battles of Cleveland Cavaliers, going through such a bad hump. And same thing with the Cleveland Indians. They weren't doing that great as well. And of course, sports team in Cleveland. I love Cleveland. Don't get me wrong. I love what they have done with their sports teams, especially over the past 10 years. But there were some moments, even in the draft, I would even say, where you draft Anthony Bennett, who didn't even make the starting lineup of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and now is not even a part of NBA basketball anymore, which is pretty sad to say. So what were those moments like for you as a sports fan, to live in a city where their teams are not necessarily at the playoff position, or that weren't, that transition from going from the first rounds of the draft pick to, okay, now we're in the NBA Finals.
Well, I will say that no matter how bad the teams were, and I lived in Cleveland from 2010 to 2015, no matter how bad the teams were, Cleveland fans love Cleveland sports, especially the Browns. Like, that is a die-hard football town. And it doesn't matter what's going on in the city. You know what you're doing on Sunday. You are either tailgating and going to the game, or if they're on the road, you're going somewhere to watch the games. So that was cool to be part of that. It was cool to be part of a city that embraced all the teams like that. And I knew that they were going to finally get a win eventually. And I actually did a story with Stipe Miocic, who is now the UFC heavyweight champion. I did a story with him in 2013 where we talked about him being the first person to break Cleveland's curse. Cleveland hadn't won a championship in 50 years. They got so close with the drive, the fumble, all these different moments. And I actually did a story with Stipe talking about how he could become the champion. And he did. Stipe was the one who broke Cleveland's curse. And then a few months later, the Cavaliers ended up winning the championship. But I will say that Cleveland is a gritty city. And I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. Cleveland is such a gritty city, and I appreciate how much they love their sports. And it actually made me love football that much more. And I was already a huge football fan, but I became such a bigger football fan because of the Cleveland Browns, even though I was there for the 4-12 season, the 3-13 season. I think we might have had a 5-11 season. That was a real good one.
I mean, of course, there's always, the heroes that bring the championships to Cleveland. But I would even argue and say that one Miz brought a championship to Cleveland back in 2010 when he cashed in Money in the Bank against Randy Orton. So would you even count that?
I don't know. And Ziggler, of course, won, a few championships as well. I don't know if we can count them, but I always reported them on the news. I swear, like every time it happened, I'm like, I can put this in the newscast.
Yeah. And speaking about your newscast, you did have some very, very interesting visitors, as you say, visit the newscast room. One I want to get to first was the TNA World Heavyweight Champion of the World, Bully Ray. And that interaction definitely has to be a memorable one, to say the least.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, so I was doing my broadcast, doing my thing. And out of nowhere walks in Bully Ray, who just scared the crap out of me. What a great heel. Isn't he a great heel?
Oh, yeah.
He might be one of the best modern day heels in wrestling. So, yeah, that was fun. So every time wrestling was in town, whether it was WWE, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, I would do whatever I could to get someone in the studio so selfishly I could hang out with wrestlers and interview a wrestler. Then we would work in a segment where they would either be my guest on my segment, which was called The Buzz, or they would interrupt my segment called The Buzz. If they were faces, I would welcome them in. If they were heels, they would, make their appearance and make me feel bad, like Bully Ray did. Or The Miz, actually. The Miz interrupted me a few times in my broadcast. But this is actually the genesis of my YouTube channel. I didn't plan on having a wrestling YouTube channel where I interviewed celebrities. I would have someone like The Miz, Bully Ray, Jack Swagger, Mick Foley come into the news station. We'd do an interview, like a minute and a half on TV, and they would say, "Oh yeah, Raw's in town. Tickets start at $20. You want to come on out to the show tonight?" And I thought, well, if this person's here, I'm such a huge fan of them. I want to just do an interview with them where I can ask them questions that I genuinely care about as like a fan. And I thought this interview has to live somewhere. If we're only putting this tiny little bit on TV, I want the rest of the interview to be somewhere. So I started uploading it to my YouTube channel, which had 4 subscribers at the time, just thinking I want this to live somewhere so other wrestling fans can appreciate it, because I appreciated it. And it was an interview with The Miz that really started to kind of get the ball rolling. It was an interview I did with The Miz. He was about to throw out the first pitch for the Cleveland Indians. And it was right after CM Punk had done the pipe bomb. And Miz had said, "This is the most exciting time to be a wrestling fan since the Attitude Era." And a bunch of people picked up on that. And my video got 6,000 views. And then I woke up the next day and it had 36,000 views. And that's how my YouTube channel started, because of me just being a fan and wanting to interview wrestlers when they were in town.
And that's awesome. I mean, of course, like I mentioned before, as a longtime subscriber since 2013, I've noticed a lot just from the beginnings, like you mentioned before, of The Miz, of the many, 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 many iconic interviews with Dolph Ziggler, which I think at this point has to be 7 or 8 at this point.
I think it's 16 or 17.
Oh, so double that. Nice.
We'll do another one. He lives just down the street now.
and that's awesome. I mean, and then, of course, going down the road, you have interviewed so many people. Even I would even have to mention one of the interviews that I've been a huge fan of was your interview with the chairman, Sean Spears, and of course the interaction that he had on your interview with your recent interview with Peyton Royce, which I thought that was very, very iconic, to say the least, as well. No pun intended.
See what you did there. Sean Spears has been so nice to me. I mean, to grant me that first interview after he was released from his WWE contract, I mean, was really kind. He didn't need to give me that time. And that kind of happened. It just worked out that I happened to be in Orlando. I was doing an interview for the new Toy Story movie. He lived kind of close to Orlando. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to be here. if you want to swing by my Disney resort hotel and do an interview, let's make this happen. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So you got to picture, I'm coming from my Disney resort hotel and crossing over this pond, walking through like the restaurant area, standing in like the front lobby. And here comes this guy in a sleeveless shirt with a mohawk who's gigantic. And I'm like, oh, hey, man, good to meet you. And it was just such a weird setting. So yeah, Sean Spears has been really kind to me. He's not so kind when you step into the ring with him, though.
Oh, no. And especially with those, I believe, 20 chops.
Between him, Tyler Breeze, and his students, he had 20 chops, which I think just starting to heal up from. Yeah, the redness, I think, is just starting to go away.
Can you talk about that experience really quick? Because obviously you interviewed both Sean Spears and Tyler Breeze. And then afterwards, we had a little preview from one Peyton Royce on how bad the chops were. And the quote that I had was, he's not that much of a chopper, which you heard that chop from between the screen right here. I think we could hear it all the way down Alaska, as they would say.
So the plan was, after I did that interview with Sean Spears, which was, I think, like, it was like May. It was June. It was last June. Oh, wow. It was a year ago. Crazy. I knew that he had this wrestling school, and he said, you're welcome anytime. I know that you used to train. You're welcome anytime. My ring is your ring. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'll come down and we'll shoot a segment. So it turned out that I was going to be in that area in January. And I reached out to him and I said, can we do this thing? He said, yeah, let's do this thing. So I just thought, honestly, I was going to go in the ring, Mike, and take a few bumps, run the ropes, maybe take a scoop slam, or like something easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Sean goes, what if I give you a chop? And I'm like, I mean, I guess like one chop, like that doesn't, sure. I mean, okay. I said, why don't we make it more interesting? Why don't we line up all your students and have all them chop me? He's like, dude, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it'll make a great segment. Let's do it. And then on camera, we kind of made it look like it was Peyton Royce's idea. And I'd say after like the fifth chop, maybe, my chest just went numb. So I probably could have taken 120 chops. But don't quote me on that. I do not want to take 120 chops. I don't want to take 20 chops ever again. But it made for a cool segment, I think. It was fun.
Shout out to Flatbacks Wrestling, by the way. Hopefully they are not going to have you do that again. But hey, I think you can do it.
Look, I think anyone can do anything. I don't know if I want to do that again. Plus, everybody's already seen it. Nobody wants to see that again.
Or maybe they do. I'm just kidding. So yeah, once again, you've had some great experiences throughout your interview, whether that was the worst interview of all time with MJF, or whether that was the most painful experience with multiple chops from the Flatback Wrestling faithful. But one I do want to mention was the transition in your career from Cleveland to all of a sudden you're going to the sunny side of things of Florida. Can you tell me about what that transition was like? Because as a fan, it was pretty cool to see you go from the home of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Indians, whatever the case may be, to, oh my God, you're this close to the Performance Center. Oh my God.
It seemed like the next logical step in my career. And my whole life has been driven by, I want to do more and bigger things all the time. Hence why I just recently moved to Los Angeles. But when the job came up in Miami, the host that had been on that show that I ended up hosting, it was called Deco Drive. That host had been there for like 10 plus years, Louis Aguirre, and he's such an incredible host. He ended up moving on to host a show called The Insider, which came on after Entertainment Tonight. So I thought, wow, if he went to take that job, that means there must be an opening on this amazing, really cool entertainment show that at the time had been on the air for almost 20 years. Whew. So they weren't interested in flying me in to do an interview. So this actually comes full circle right back to that story about me lying to the program or the general manager to get an intern interview. I was going to be going down to Orlando. I was going to be going to Disney World for the weekend. And I said to my agent, well, if they're interested, I will change my flight. I'll rent a car. I will drive down to Miami just so they can like see me in person, so I can do an interview in person. And then they can make a decision from there. So that's actually how I ended up getting even just my foot in the door. I was very fortunate that everything worked out and I ended up getting the job. And what a cool job. I mean, Miami's an incredible city. What a destination spot. And through that job, I mean, I traveled quite a bit with my job in Cleveland as an entertainment reporter. With that job in Miami, I mean, I traveled everywhere. I went to Paris and Hawaii and Mexico City and of course, Toronto, LA, New York. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I was very fortunate to be able to interview the biggest celebrities in the world. And that's what I really love. I just love having conversations. And the fact that a camera happens to be there picking them up like this one makes it that much better.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about your interview style is the fact that you make it into a conversation, and the fact that you make, for example, I'll always quote this one. One of my favorite interviews that people should check out, link will be in the description as well, would always be the interview with, surprisingly, not Johnny Gargano, surprisingly, not Dolph Ziggler. It's actually an interview with Mr. Alex Riley, and that one in particular. The thing that I love is that the fact that you created this vibe where he goes from his beginnings to talking about his career in NXT just like that. And the fact that it, you know, and of course I'm a huge fan of Alex Riley as well. His run in NXT after a commentator though, interesting to say the least. But it's so great of the way that you transition into segues and segueing into just, you know, they'll mention something that you probably didn't have on notes, or as an interviewer myself, having these notes on my phone, which, you know, of course we are currently speaking, I have a lot, you know, and just having them mention something that's such a great soundbite. I mean, what's it like to even have those moments? Do you just go and roll with it, or do you say, okay, I'm looking back when I'm editing this later, or giving this to my editor and saying, make sure you put that in front of the clip, as the famous CVV does, put a very good quote in there, intro, full interview?
Well, I do that so people go, oh, I should watch this full interview. That's the only reason I put that little teaser clip at the start. That's a little TV thing, like give them a little taste of it. But I don't go searching for sound bites. I just want to have a conversation in the same way that, you know, you'd have a conversation in any other aspect of your life. So if we were at a party tonight and I ran into you and I knew a few things about you, I would just kind of guide the conversation to those things that I knew. Mm-hmm. I think a great interviewer tries to know more than just a few things. I think a great interviewer tries to know as much as they possibly can, does all the research they can so they can be fully prepared. So if the conversation zigs, they can zig. If it zags, they can zag. So you're right. There's a lot of times when a conversation happens in one of these interviews where they start talking about something that I didn't plan to talk about, but oh my gosh, that's interesting. Like, let's kind of go down that road a little bit. And I think that's what the best interviewers that have come before me have done. And, you know, they've already carved this path. They already blazed this trail. And I'm just trying to do, you know, an impersonation of what they're doing, basically. And I think that it's funny. I looked up to Joe Rogan when he was hosting Fear Factor, you know, when you were like an embryo. I was looking up to Joe Rogan because I loved his conversational style of hosting. You know, we've seen so many hosts that are like, coming up after the break, we're going to see if they can eat these cockroaches. And I love that Joe Rogan was just like, you know, oh my God, there's cockroaches here. You think they're going to eat them? Like, you know, he was just like much more conversational in the same way that someone would say it in real life. And now, I mean, look what he's transitioned into with his podcast, the most popular podcast in the world. And there's no moment in any Joe Rogan conversation where you can tell he's just ticking things off of a list. He's just literally having a 2-3 hour conversation. And I think that that's what we should all aspire to do. Just treat it as a conversation.
Yeah. And especially with interviews, I've always liked to, as you mentioned, about just making a regular conversation. I mean, you look at Joe Rogan, of course, I absolutely loved his commentary back when he did UFC, along with Mike Goldberg, two absolute legends, by the way.
Here we go.
Yeah, and I love that. And then when he transitioned into his podcast, there's no other way to describe his podcast other than just him being himself. And that's what absolutely just drives me to continue the passion. I mean, I look up to a lot of people, of course, like yourself, like Joe Rogan. Howard Stern has to be another one as well, who takes that conversation. I mean, I'll even pull one of his interviews right now. One of the interviews that I absolutely love was with his conversation with Conan O'Brien. And he had mentioned about Conan's depression. And it was like, oh, well, tell me more about, you know, your stories and stuff like that, which again, of course, it's probably not in the notes, but just the way of just bringing stuff like that up makes you want to listen, makes you want to subscribe.
The biggest thing is be interested and stop trying to be interesting. I think that's the best thing you can do as an interviewer, as a host, and as a content creator. Stop trying to be interesting and start being interested. And I think that that's when you're going to win.
That's awesome. I mean, that's how I see Chris Van Vliet. I mean, obviously, you know, you see these interviews, it's not just about, okay, how did you start your career? How did you do this? It's like, so you want to win the Royal Rumble. Why so? You know, quoting that from the 2013 or 2014 Royal Rumble interview with you, Dolph Ziggler, and The Miz, who happened to be there.
I'm just genuinely interested. I'm noticing that, like, now I'm having the problem. I was sitting in front of my window. Now the sun's going down here as the camera is getting much darker. I'm just genuinely interested. Yeah, I'm just genuinely interested in, like, finding out what makes people tick. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, like, what podcasts do you listen to, thinking I'm going to name off a bunch of wrestling podcasts. And that's not the case. And it's no offense to those wrestling podcasts, but if I'm going to spend an hour in my car or an hour at the gym, I want to learn something that's going to help me in life. Not that listening to podcasts, wrestling podcasts won't help you learn, but I want to listen to something like where someone's done something that I would love to do, or maybe thought that I wasn't possible for me to do that, and find out how they crack that code. And those are the types of podcasts that I love the best. And I want to try to do that same thing myself, but you know, we just happen to be talking to wrestlers.
Yeah. I mean, of course, if I want to put some podcast names out there that are very inspirational, of course, people might not agree, but you know what? It's just a personal preference.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
I'm talking about The Herd with Colin Cowherd. That happens to be one of the podcasts I listen to. Same thing with First Take. Same thing goes for Get Up with on ESPN. Same thing goes with, oh my goodness, there's a lot of them. I can't name
Chris Van Vliet show.
Oh, of course. Yes, the Chris Van Vliet show, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find all that links
everywhere. Yeah.
Description below.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Yeah. You could also, there's a a spider that just happened to have there.
Oh, very nice. You wanted to make an appearance.
You can also order a cameo. Yes, you can also order a shout out from Chris Van Vliet himself. Link will be in the description below.
Oh my, how many links are in this description? Wow.
There's a lot. It's Good Brother Dialogue. There's going to be a lot of links. Speaking about that, can you talk about what it's been like shouting out for your fans? I mean, of course, I've ordered some. Maybe I've ordered some here.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
So how do you feel about doing these shout outs? I mean, because I visit the website a lot, and each and every time you get a new one, you know, you're connecting to the fan, even though you physically or, you know, digitally cannot see them. You know, you're still making that physical connection with that person, or emotional connection, whatever the case may be. How does it feel to have that kind of connection with the fan?
Well, it starts from a place of, like, genuine gratitude. Like, of all the people on Cameo that you could pay your hard-earned money to get a shout out from, you're picking me? Like, it's like, oh my God, like I need to now try to make this as special as I possibly can for that person. Because look, I remember being a hardcore fan of everything that I was a fan of. And like when I get interested in something, I dive all the way into it, whether that's pro wrestling or it's broadcasting or it's fantasy football. I'm a big pro bass fisherman, or not pro bass. I'm pro bass fishing fan. I love bass fishing myself. I dive right into it. So when I see these cameos pop up, I'm like, yeah, like, wow, that's so crazy that this person chose me out of this. So I signed up for Cameo. We did a TV story about it like 2 years ago when it just started in Miami. And Cameo gave us a budget to buy one cameo so we could make it part of the TV segment. So we we bought one from Lance Bass, and like we jokingly made it seem like I was the biggest NSYNC fan in the world. And I was like, oh, this thing's pretty cool. I'm going to sign up. Like, what the heck? Why not? And I signed up just because one of my friends was like, that'd be funny if you sign up. I'm like, sure. Then I ended up getting a cameo like a month later. And I'm like, dude, you'll never believe this. It's my friend Daniel. I'm like, you'll never believe this, Daniel. I actually got a cameo. I can't believe it. So there was like a real excitement, like on my end too, as I'm sure there was for the person who ordered it.
Well, that's awesome. Like I mentioned before, of course, you got to put that plug in because, of course, this is sort of monetized. Make sure you guys go support Chris Van Vliet, CVV himself, on Cameo. Link will be in the description. Again,
you should make a T-shirt that just says "link in the description." Thank you, Mike.
I mean, of course, it's all about marketing. It's always about networking. Of course, Chris Van Vliet, of course, is not only a world famous interviewer. He is not just a world famous on-site host. He is not just a world famous newscaster. He is also, for those who don't know, he's also a ring announcer. Yes, for Blueprint Wrestling, I'm hoping I'm saying that right. And like, it blows my mind to see, again, an aspiring broadcaster as myself, to see someone that you look up to do all these different avenues and do all these cool, awesome stuff, and being a ring announcer for Toronto's wrestling extravaganza, as I might say, because I've looked at their stuff and wow, the thing that they are doing, especially for an independent wrestling promotion. Oh my goodness. Like, can you talk about the opportunity of becoming a broadcasting legend, as they say, for the ring announcing position?
I'm definitely not a ring announcing legend at all. Like, I still feel like every time I get in there, I'm like, how am I supposed to do this thing? I've been doing it now for 12 years, here and there, like not consistently for one promotion for 12 years, but I started as a ring announcer in 2008. I interviewed a magician on the TV show that I was working on in Toronto. Turned out he was a wrestling fan. It just kind of came up in conversation. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm part of this wrestling company called Stranglehold Pro Wrestling. And I'm like, oh, cool. If you ever need a ring announcer, I'm your guy. He's like, yeah, actually, we do need a ring announcer. I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. Like, if you actually need a ring announcer, I'm your guy. He's like, no, I'm not kidding either. Like, our show is on June 1st. See you there. And I'm like, oh, like that actually happened. Okay. And that's honestly how it came together. And I've just been fortunate that wherever I've gone, the cool thing, I've traveled a lot and obviously moved a lot in my career. The cool thing is there's wrestling everywhere, like everywhere. So I've been really fortunate to be able to ingratiate myself into the different local indie federations in every city that I've worked in. A couple different companies in Toronto. I've been a ring announcer for Johnny Gargano at Prime Wrestling in Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah. And then my friends started Blueprint Pro Wrestling in Deerfield Beach, Florida. And I'm like, well, if you need a ring announcer, I'm your guy. The cool thing about being a ring announcer is you are the master of ceremonies. You are the ringleader. Nothing begins or ends without you. And that's what's so cool about it. It's a very, very small part to play, but it's such an important part to play. And when you see the people who are the best of the best at this, the Tony Schimmels of the world, of course, Howard Finkel, Justin Roberts, Greg Hamilton, Mike Rome, Lillian Garcia. I'm just going to name everybody. JoJo, everybody, right?
Right. Lillian Garcia.
I think I said her, but yes, if I didn't, Lillian Garcia is so sweet. And it's funny that it is such an overlooked job and it's such a thankless job when it's not done, or when it's done well. When it's not done well, it just stands out like a sore thumb. And that's what's so interesting, because you see someone like a Justin Roberts, who, you ever seen him make a mistake? I don't think so. That's how good he is.
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite Justin Roberts thing, if we can mention that really quick, is how he introduces Jon Moxley, the AEW world champion. He's like, he doesn't just say Jon Moxley. He says, it's Jon Moxley.
He started that with John Cena.
Yeah, I know. But it's just awesome. Same thing with Tony Schimmel when he did with the Rated R
Superstar.
Or even, and this is going to Justin Roberts in AEW. He introduces an AEW talent by the name of Michael Nakazawa. And the way that he does it,
yeah,
Mr. Turkish Oil Wrestling himself, Michael Naka, Knocka's out. Like, that's awesome. And he points out.
Maybe you should become a ring announcer.
I'm trying. I'm trying to make it in the industry right now.
Well, I think that there's going to be a big distinction between. I know you've done a lot of play-by-play stuff, which is awesome. There's it's two completely different tool sets, though.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's gotten so dark here. Maybe I should turn a light on.
I don't mind. You saw me.
Let's see if I can. Hold on 1 second. Let's see what happens if I turn this light on over here. I think that might help a little bit, or maybe I'm backlit now. Oh, no, that's better.
You're
way
better than me. Way better than my life. So, by the way, for those who don't know, you got to support Chris on this little thing called, I don't know, Collar and Elbow. Yes, make sure you guys use his code, which...
Oh, you have a code. No. Use Mike's code. What's your code?
Yeah, my code is Sock Monkey Mike, but you know what? That's not.
So use his code. Use Mike's code Sock Monkey Mike for 10% off of all of Collar and Elbow stuff. They got some great new gear that just came in last week.
Yeah, and speaking about, by the time we're recording this, shout out to Collar and Elbow who celebrated their birthday, actually. So make sure you guys use not only my code, his code as well, because
Sock Monkey Mike. Yeah.
I do appreciate that, my friend. So before we get everything wrapped up, because I know it's very, very late over here in California, the thing that I do want to mention is that throughout every single interview that you've had, every single legendary interview, because of course I don't think there's ever been a bad interview out there.
Oh, that's very kind.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, I mean, I'm not only speaking this for myself, I'm also speaking about from every single fan watching this, or maybe I tweeted about it and then they just watched the 5 seconds of this and they're like, okay. But I'm speaking out from like legitimate truth. There is no other broadcaster, to my knowledge, that's currently doing what they're doing, that is conducting, has a great composure, has great just etiquette, just to have a normal conversation with all these celebrities and wrestlers and all that has just the, you know what, let's just have a conversation and make it interesting, make an interesting conversation. That's why I have this Good Brother dialogue, is to, not only just interview you and get the people who don't know who Chris Van Vliet, which I'm surprised if you follow me, you don't know who that is already. Legendary status himself, with over 260,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Link will be in the description.
Is the link in the description?
Yes, it is. And by the way, congratulations on that as well.
Oh, thank you.
Just the style that, from the beginnings of the channel to now, I think it's absolutely just mind-blowing to see you keep killing it each and every interview. That's why people do put on the notification sign and tune in and, and try to be the top comment, which sadly, still to this day, still hasn't done it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And look, it's just been a journey of like following what's been interesting to me. And these conversations are interesting to me. I hope I will continue to do them for a long time, but I still want to do other stuff and more stuff. And, I just want to say that I've said this many times to you before, but you're doing great work. Well, and you need to keep doing this. You need to keep chasing after this, find the people and you have that inspire you and emulate them, and find the people that are doing the work that you think is really good and do your own, do that, but then do your own version of that. And I'm excited to see where you're going to be at in 5 years from now.
Hopefully this pandemic is over by then. But anywho, but once again, Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this interview, this dialogue. This has just been, in my opinion, just a great conversation, to say the least. I think that it was just talking to your heroes and talking to those that inspire you is different than just saying, oh my God, I'm such a huge fan of yours. Just like, please just notice me. It's way better to just get a normal conversation and to learn about the backgrounds, learn how you could get into the industry, how somehow a guy with 320 subscribers could possibly make it to not even 1,000. But it's just awesome to get that insight. So I really, from the bottom of my heart, again, thank you so much. Well,
you're welcome. And I want to acknowledge you again for what you're doing. And you only have 320 subscribers?
Yeah, sadly.
Oh, come on. You'll have way more by the time this interview comes out. Look, I remember I had 300 and something subscribers forever. And It took me, let me do the math again, 7.5 years to get 100,000 subscribers to get that silver play button.
Well, we all know that Mr. 260 deserves a Mr. 1 milli, as they say.
Well, I hope so. One day, one day.
You will, you will.
That's one of the specific goals.
So finally, to end this great conversation, because I know we're hitting an hour, it's going to be late over here, but you know what? We're good. We're good because we have a good conversation going. So my final question to you, Chris, is something that kind of means dear to my heart, and that is for guys like me, for men and women who are, revolutionizing the broadcasting game. You have people like Denise Salcedo that you've interviewed before. You've interviewed people like Alicia Atu, Greg Hamilton. These people that are revolutionizing the game today. What's your advice to those who are kind of like, you know what, I want to get into this. This is a passion of mine, but I don't know how to do it. Like, I know I have a YouTube channel that has 2 subscribers, man. I don't know how to do it. Like, what's your advice to that?
Well, now's the best time to ever get into this. Like I said earlier, when I started in broadcasting in 2005, we didn't have these outlets. We couldn't make podcasts. They didn't exist. We couldn't make YouTube videos because YouTube didn't exist. So I'd say if this is something that you want to do, start today. Don't wait until you have the perfect camera, the perfect mic, or the perfect artwork for your channel or whatever. Just start doing it and start figuring it out on the way. Find somebody who's doing the thing that you want to do and start emulating them. Number one, it shows you that it's possible to do that thing. And number two, they've already blazed the trail for you. So you can take where they're at, look at where you're at, and then reverse engineer it back to where you are and go, okay, I just need to do these things to get to that stage. So I would say, I love this quote. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And I think that too many people sit and wait and hope for things to happen instead of actually making them happen. So my advice, in a nutshell, is go make some stuff happen.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, once again, I want to thank you. Thank you for being not only a part of this dialogue or this interview, whatever you'd like to call it, not only being a part of this conversation, but just being a hero. And I always tease on my Instagram story saying, there goes my hero for one Johnny Gargano or Kevin Owens or Becky Lynch or Drew Gulak, whichever day it's best. But the song holds true. There goes my hero, watch him as he goes. There's a reason why that song is in existence. People think that it's because of one Kurt Cobain, but that's obviously not the case. It's honestly, that emulates, in real life. You look up to these people that you've watched for years. You've looked at someone like me who've known what they wanted to do ever since at age 11 or age 10. And, you look at these aspiring broadcasters that go from the bottom up, and to see them succeed now is more rewarding than seeing yourself succeed. And that's something that I truly believe. I have this observation, as they say, of supporting those who support you. Being passionate is something that's so important, especially in today's time. My friends always laugh at me over in college or anything else that are my age because they're like, dude, you know what you want to do. Like, why? Like, how can you know something ever since at this age what you want to do? And I'm like, this is something that I want so bad. And that I think that this is the dream job, in my opinion. Like, of course, there's doctors. Of course, there's all this that are revolutionizing the world today. But there's something different between being behind a microphone. There's something different of being behind, like in front of the camera and speaking, memorizing lines or memorizing, a teleprompter, which obviously you've seen before that I'm not the best at it, but it's getting better, and seeing stuff like that, a part of the industry. I actually had a talk with Full Sail University recently, and their programming is absolutely one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And I talked to the one of the receptionists or one of the program directors, and I told him, and I just how we're talking right now, this is something that I want, that I personally love this business. I love the sports industry. I love the wrestling business, as they say, because they laughed like, oh, you're only here for WWE. It's like, no, I love the business in general, because you talk about the broadcasting industry. And the thing that I love about it so much is that when you surround yourself with other people that are as passionate or even more passionate than you, you're going full sail. You have a great support system. And that's what I love, is that the fact that I watch and look up to people like Chris Van Vliet, who you should definitely follow. And, you know, and just looking at what you have done over the past almost decade, you know, at least for me, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to think that, like, seeing people like Chris Van Vliet and say, man, he's a friend of mine. Like, you asked me that 2013, I don't think I would have believed you. So it's crazy to think that I get to have these conversations and get that advice and get that knowledge and get that input, because to me, whether I suck at one thing, that's okay, because I get to learn from it later. You know, if this interview gets to me and says, you know what, Mike, you got to do better, buddy. You know what, then fine. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do better the second time or the third time or the fourth time, because to me, it's always about process over outcome. Shout out to Mike Bennett for that one. And it holds true. So that's what I love about this business. I know I'm going on a little bit longer than I should be, but I love about this business because I'm so passionate. I love about this, that I love every blood, sweat, and tear about it, because it's all about storytelling. I had recently done an interview before this with Allison Snyder and Dylan Snyder, who were a part of Disney Channel. And they talk about storytelling a lot. And that makes me smile, because it's that's what storytelling in this business is. I could be calling a wrestling match, and sure, the commentators don't matter or whatever the fan thinks, but the fact of the matter is that you're behind that announcer's table and you are telling a story that's happening in the ring by these gifted, competitive athletes, both men and women, that are revolutionizing the game. How can you ask for a better job than that? Same thing with interviewing people. When you interview all these people, it's like, what's a better job than interviewing Johnny Gargano, my hero? That's not a lot. Or same thing when it goes for your on-air hosting. Same thing when you did with your Cleveland News. Same thing.
Well, I think if you're doing something that you love, if you're doing something you're passionate about, for me and you, it's broadcasting. For someone else listening to this, it might be something completely different. Whatever it is that is your thing, make that your thing that pays you money. That's the dream.
Yeah. And that's what I think about when it comes to broadcasting, because it's something of course, it's not going to be rainbows and sunshines every single day. We all know this. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be horrible days. There's going to be days that you want to cry. But at least you could say with this career in particular that you're putting smiles on faces. And you're putting smiles on faces not only for yourself, but for other people as well. Because you have people that are aspiring broadcasters, like I mentioned before, like myself, that are like, man, my internship dumped me. Oh, that's cool. I didn't care about them anyway. But then I go to I watch a match. You know what I mean? I funny thing, actually, I had, which match was it? It was, Johnny Gargano versus Isaiah Swerve Scott. I had it on mute, and I commentated the match myself.
That's great.
And was I the best? I'm going to admit it, no. But you know what? It was awesome doing it anyway.
Well, do you think JR was the best commentating his third match? Or nobody was listening to Joe Rogan's episode number 314, If you're willing to put in the work with whatever it is that you're, chasing after, it'll be rewarded.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. So is there anything that you would like to plug? Your Spotlight Hour, of course, you can always find him on YouTube, Chris Van Vliet. You could always find him on Cameo, Chris Van Vliet. And you could always find him on Twitter and Instagram. Of course, you already heard.
I would say just the links are in the description. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate you. Thank you for the warm welcome to California. It's nice to be out here on the West Coast. This is going to be my home for a long, long time.
Well, we are happy and awesome to hear that you are here in California. Finally, after all the times of wishing, imagining interviewing Chris Van Vliet in California, man. And then when I got the conversation saying that you were going to be here, yes.
Here we are.
So thank you, Chris. Everything that he is on will be link in the description below. And once again, Chris, thank you so much for having this. I know I'm running on a bit, but you know what? That's how my outros go. And until we meet again, my friend, I will see you in the hopefully next time we might do this. So until we meet again, I will see you guys again soon.
All right, man. Be well.
And boom.